Austrian writer Hermann Brock wrote, "Those who live by the sea can hardly form a single thought of which the sea would not be part." True. Many thoughts of my life are associated with the Irish Sea, its grandeur, the sound of its splashing waves, breeze and seagulls. The sea to me is an everlasting feeling of hope. My first book I wrote together with my dad, Tony Sanders, entitled Heave a Bit Driver, 7 Miles of Laughter, was about the docks. There wouldn't be docks if not for the Irish Sea. I often take my granddaughter Tanisha, who is my world, for a walk by the beach. I sometimes come and sit alone, enjoying its beauty. Anything about the sea and by the sea has a promise of protection. Isaiah, the great prophet, wrote, "When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee." My name is Lorraine Sanders. I am a writer, actress and producer. Thanks to the efforts of my crew and cast, I was blessed with a Best Actress Award twice by the Wirral International Film Festival, and my book was well received. I am in the process of writing a new storyline based on outstanding women who have contributed to our world. My friend, Joseph Matthew, suggested St. Winifred to me, the wonderful Welsh saint and my immediate neighbour. She lived some 48 miles away from my home in a place called Holywell, a small Welsh town. Although the difference between us was 13 centuries, saints live forever, so I decided to meet her. Holywell takes its name from St. Winifred's Well. I reached there on a sunny November morning. The area dates back to the Roman period but became a site of Christian pilgrimage since about 660 AD and is dedicated to St. Winifred, who, according to legend, was beheaded there by Caradoc, who attempted to attack her. Canon Francis Doyle, a holy priest, was at the front doors to receive me. Although I had known a few things about St. Winifred, I had not known her completely, so I asked Canon Doyle about St. Winifred.
She was born really at the beginning of the 7th century, and she was born here in Holywell. And in the course of time, Caradoc, who was a local prince from Harden, he made advances to her according to the legend about her, and made improper advances, I should say, and she actually refused to cooperate and actually ran down towards here. He chased her and decapitated her. He cut off her head with his sword, and where her head fell on the ground is where a spring sprung up, and it became St. Winifred's Well over time. St. Bino was her uncle, and he came out of a church he had established not far from here, and he came according again to the legend and prayed over her. He picked up her head and attached it again to her body, prayed, and by the grace of God she was restored to life. And that's really how the whole cult of St. Winifred began, with the spring water that came forth, had the reputation from the beginning of being healing waters. And over time, People came here on pilgrimage. So it's fairly unique in that it has been a place of pilgrimage for over 1,300 years. For a time, the Jesuit fathers had a mission in Holywell and looked after the pilgrims and so on who came here. There have been a number of changes, naturally enough, over time, but basically that's the main features of the history of this place. People come from far and wide. It's really an international shrine because pilgrimages come from Poland, from America, from other places, as well as, of course, local ones. And indeed, our own diocese here, the Diocese of Wrexham, has an annual pilgrimage around about the time in June when St. Winifred's is actually, her feast is celebrated round about the 22nd, or the Sunday just after that is when we have a pilgrimage. And most, if not all, of the clergy in the diocese will come to that, and indeed many people from far and wide, really. It's a day of great celebration of Holy Mass and prayer and joy, and the relic of Saint Winifred is venerated. There are, of course, many other pilgrimages that take place throughout the year. I suppose the pilgrimage season begins at Pentecost here and goes on till the end of September. But the shrine is open the whole year round, apart from Christmas Day and St. Stephen's Day.
Holywell was definitely blessed with the peace and holiness of St. Winifred. She lived there, lives there, and will continue to live there. Canon Doyle took me on a tour of the place. There was a small chapel that had a statue of the Blessed Virgin with Child Jesus. Unlike many places, the statue of Child Jesus was laughing. The chapel was built by Lady Margaret Beaufort, the Countess of Richmond and Derby. It also had the icons of St. Winifred and St. Bino, her uncle. After spending a few minutes inside the chapel, I accompanied Canon Francis Doyle to the spring, the place that has recorded the highest number of miraculous cures. The decapitated head of Saint Winifred fell to the ground from which a spring grows that has never ceased since the 7th century. The well continues to be a fountain of miraculous cures even to this day. By the well, there was a statue of St. Winifred, the woman who was courageous, the woman who stood by what she believed in, and who stands tall even today as the mighty figure of Welsh womanhood. St. Winifred is listed in the Roman Martyrology. The Roman Martyrology is the official martyrology of the Catholic Church. Martyrology, according to the Catechism, is the supreme witness given to the truth of the faith. It means bearing witness even unto death. Rather than renounce his faith, the martyr bears witness with extraordinary fortitude to the belief that Christ suffered, died and rose again from the dead for our salvation. Saint Winifred became a martyr when she was beheaded by Caradoc. But after her uncle Bino joined her head with her body, She came back to life and lived for another 22 years as a nun. There is a beautiful museum at Holywell that has some of the archaeological props from the past. Conan Doyle explained about the museum. His words were so inspiring. It seemed like Conan Doyle loved to talk about the courageous saint with enthusiasm, as Saint Winifred is also a role model for him both as a priest and a man. David Tarbrook is the communications officer of the Diocese of Wrexham. I spoke with him in detail about the diocese's plans to develop the shrine.
Well, yes, I think in the UK in particular, we're becoming much more of a secular society. The well has been here for centuries, and yet it still attracts people, even people of no faith and of faith. People come here to visit, they come here to see the architecture, they're interested in the legend of St. Winifred, they're interested in the history. It's a fantastic tool for evangelisation. It's a presence here in North Wales. It is a presence of God's grace and mercy. It is a place of strengthening and renewed faith. People come here out of devotion. They come out of here out of curiosity. They come here to do penance. They come for a whole number of reasons. But the very fact that St. Winifred's Well has stood the test of time, has this unbroken history of pilgrimage, has somehow miraculously been through 2 world wars, and yet is still intact, is a place that continues to draw people here. It's for the new evangelisation, and God willing, it'll be here many, many more centuries and draw people to Christ to deepen their faith. The Bishop of Wrexham, Bishop Eaton, is very passionate about Holywell and about the shrine, and he has great plans to develop the site and to make it accessible to all and to open to all. The shrine itself runs many different pilgrimages throughout the year. These are supported by the Diocese of Wrexham, and the Bishop has employed people specifically here at the well to help in the administration. Pilgrims, as I said before, come from all different parts, all corners of the UK and of the world, and we give them the opportunity to sing their liturgies, to process, to venerate the relic. They come here and they bathe in the waters and take of the water. From a communications point of view, or from my point of view, I'm trying to form links with other places and communities, for example, the tourism boards, with secular and religious organisations, to make St. Winifred's Well more known, more accessible. It's about spreading the message of the well, the message of St. Winifred, about drawing people to Christ. So as a diocese, we are putting an awful lot of time and effort into developing the shrine as a jewel of evangelisation, as a place where people can come to Christ and to find him here. St. Winifred was a woman before her time. Forget the saint part, she was a very strong character. She stood for what she believed in. She did not want the advances of Caradoc. She stood firm in her faith. She becomes an example to us, to all of us, for being strong in her faith. She encourages people to be better people, to stand for what they believe in. She is a saint of our times, yet she's from the 7th century. She is still remains to be a central pillar within the Catholic Church. But we've got to remember that St. Winifred lived during a time when there were no church divisions, when there was no, it was a Catholic nation. And yet now, even though there have been divisions in the church through the Reformation, people still come here for inspiration to St. Winifred. She is known as a great intercessor, and people come to here to be like her, to pray to her, so that she would intercess on their behalf for Christ. It is a great tool in the evangelisation process, because St. Winifred herself becomes a beacon who draws people to Christ.
In the last 13 centuries, Holywell has remained a place of pilgrimage that has attracted millions of visitors. Gerald Manley Hopkins, one of the greatest English poets, wrote in his journal after his visit to Holywell in 1874, "Barod and I walked over to Holywell land, bathed at the well and returned very joyously. The sight of the water in the well as clear as glass, greenish beryl or aquamarine, trembling at the surface with the force of the springs and shaping out the 5 foils of the well, quite drew and held my eyes to it. Even now, the stress and buoyancy and abundance of the water is before my eyes." It was clear that Hopkins had great admiration for St. Winifred, and it was not just Hopkins alone. The shrine has seen the visits of some of the biggest names in history. God has unusual ways of influencing the lives of people. Some 2,000 years ago, he invited a simple but graceful woman from a small village in Galilee called Nazareth, and her name was Mary. In more recent times, he invited a humble Loreto nun from Albania to join his work to show the world the meaning of kindness, and her name was Mother Teresa. In the same way, some 1300 years ago, he handpicked a young girl to be a symbol of courage and loyalty, and her name was Saint Winifred. Her courage has brought a number of people back to faith and given them the meaning of life. I spoke to Carol Chesworth, who came to visit Holywell with her husband, and her story was transforming.
We've been coming to Holywell 20, 30 years, as long as that. And to us, in our life, Holywell, it comforts us. Yeah. Anxiety, we just feel at peace when we come here, especially with David's illness. He was diagnosed when he was 28 with bipolar, and it's helped him with his anxiety, and he just feels better when he's here. Yeah, he just feels peace is just unbelievable. Like you say, you've witnessed it.
Yeah. You walk and you can feel the energy.
You feel the energy, and it does help you. And you bathe in the water, pray to St. Winifred. I like the candles.
Your feet before?
Yeah, you put your feet in the water, take your feet out. You don't dry it, and your feet just go warm. So you must try it before you go. And she will help you, because she's helped David. She's not cured him, but she helps him.
Yeah.
She helps him with his anxiety and helps him cope. And when he is low, like now, he needed to come today. I've been on nights and we've come today. And you can tell that he feels ease.
His Excellency Peter Brignall is the 3rd Bishop of Wrexham. The good bishop is one of the greatest admirers of Holywell.
Until I came to the diocese as a student and then as a deacon, I don't think that Holywell had really come across the horizons of my life. But having been appointed here, having worked in the diocese, I see Holywell as being very important because of that witness that we see in Winifred. She was a woman, I am a man. She was a nun, I am not a religious. She lived in the 7th century, I live in the 21st century. There are huge, huge differences, but the example and the commitment of Winifred is for all time. And I see her place within the diocese, as with the other saints of that era, as being hugely important and of being as part of our Catholic heritage that is not to be forgotten. We have great modern saints, but we also have those saints of centuries ago who still have something to teach us. Because of the very human nature of Winifred and the witness of her commitment, she is, as I say, a witness for every age. And she's an example of faith. And we are in an age and a time when faith needs to be seen and needs to be shared. And therefore I see the Shrine of Holywell as being a place that is, as it were, a showcase, a window for evangelization, not just for the diocese, but for the country and for the whole world. And I would seek, therefore, to make Holywell known, to make the story of Winifred known. There are churches throughout the world who are dedicated to St. Winifred, and that also is good to draw them into our plans. But to ensure that Holywell is a place that is known as a place of pilgrimage. I was there last Sunday, and there are still, at this time of the year, people coming, people discovering Holywell. Perhaps they just come as visitors, perhaps just tourists, but within their visits they have the opportunity to move, to make that journey itself from being tourists to being visitors, to becoming pilgrims, to becoming disciples. And anything that we can do to promote Holywell as a site of religious significance. It's not just a tourist destination. It's not simply an interesting piece of architecture or history in the life of North Wales. It is a place of prayer, a place of healing, a place of forgiveness, a place of encounter with God. And whatever can be done to promote that, I would seek to do. And that does mean that there is work to be done in developing that religious sense more and more, but of also just using the site itself and the name to draw people in. As Jesus invited the disciples, when they said to him, "Where do you live?" he said, "Come and see." And I think that would be my invitation to the world, to Holywell. Come and see, experience what there is there, that sense of prayer, that historic sense of prayer, and be drawn into that love of God yourself.
Holywell also has a wonderful shop that sells religious articles. Saint Winifred's life is an example of great love and dedication. She lived, died, and rose again for what she believed. Holywell will continue to attract more pilgrims, and many people will find miraculous cure from its spring. But for me, as a person and as an artiste, she will remain the epitome of courage, a quality that so many women find difficult to make a part of their own life. No matter weak or strong, healthy or sick, sinner or saint, Saint Winifred and Holywell accepts everyone. Like the Sufi mystic Rumi said, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come, yet again, come, come."
I'm Bishop David McGough, an auxiliary bishop here in this archdiocese. I'm just so delighted through yourselves, Christian faith will have a voice. And you're here today giving voice to that media. The greatest gift that any of us has is the gift of life itself. We struggle throughout our lives to live life to the full, and we sometimes mess it up, but that life is so precious. And it is God's gift to each one of us from the very first moment of conception to the last moment of our lives, to be cherished, to be loved, to be safeguarded. So God bless you all.
Shalom World, God's own channel.